All right, I think we're back.
Yeah.
Very sorry about that, folks. Not sure, really no idea what happened because nothing was touched. But
Wow.
let's continue. Sorry, Walker, continue.
That's okay. Emily, do you want to do the intro again for the recording or?
That's fine. I can add it in
Okay,
post, as they say.
sounds good. Um, awesome. Well, first of all, thank you, Emily, for having me. As she shared, I used to actually work for a digital agency, Polar Notion, based in Atlanta, Georgia. So I led our growth, but that really touched, we're a pretty small team. So I did a lot of project management, account management, new business. So kind of touched a lot of different areas. In that process, I actually built a lot of relationships and community with other agency leaders. And honestly, this community that y'all have built, I wish it was something I knew about when I was, in that role a few years ago. That would have been really, really amazing and helpful. So really impressed with the community that y'all have built here. As I had a lot of those conversations with other agency leaders and have just kind of learned a lot, even being at Punchlist, I've kind of come to this realization that, and this is not anything magical or anything like that, but really that creating the best possible project experiences is one of the single most important things you can do as an agency. And the reason why is it touches everything. It touches sales because you can actually sell having a great process. It obviously touches operations and account management and project management, but it even touches things like culture and how your team enjoys working for your company. Because obviously, if you have great project experiences, then that's gonna translate to great employee experiences as well. And even just like the financials of it too. Like if you have a more streamlined, optimized project experience, you're gonna have higher gross profit margin. You're gonna retain more employees. There's endless benefits here to focusing on this. So that's just kind of like, we all probably understood that, but I just wanted to really set that that foundation there for this conversation. And on the flip side, if you don't have a great project experience, then it's very noticeable, right? Project delays are the worst for everyone. It results in frustrated clients, frustrated employees. It's not a great thing for anyone. So I remember actually having a conversation with a friend of mine who leads an agency here in town, and he kind of summed it up this way. He said, clients hire agencies because of the quality of their work. So they can see a future where the agency's done this amazing product or put out this amazing website for them, but a lot of times they fire them or they have a tough time with them because their process sucks. And so, you think about, the client like gets all excited about, seeing other work that the agency's done and seeing and trying to put themselves in those shoes without really thinking about how bad could this be for me, right? And so that's ultimately, those are the two questions that you need to answer though for clients is how amazing could this be, but also like what's the worst case scenario for them as well. And so that's a lot of what this project experience conversation is going to focus on. So before we really dive in, a couple things that today is not going to be. Today we're not going to talk about magic bullets to creating a great project experience. I'm not going to prescribe a super specific solution to any of your businesses because all of your businesses are very different, and especially when you get into creative work like you do, it's going to be very contextual to the business that you run. So it's also not going to be a really polished presentation. So I'm not a fan personally of just someone who just clicks through slides. And so I want this to be conversational. And honestly, it's going to be way more valuable for everyone if y'all participate, if y'all share your experiences, and if this isn't just me talking for the next 45 minutes. If you participate in chat, like Emily said, we might bring some people up on screen if we can figure out how to do that. So yeah, that's my encouragement today, is just to really focus on how can you engage, how can you participate. Nancy, I get that. I'll try to repeat important notes or important bullets. So before we dive in, I want your input. I'd love just to hear everyone type in chat really quick. Why'd you come today? What is something that if you looked back at 1:30, we've wrapped up our time, or 1:30 Eastern time, not sure where everyone is. We've wrapped up our time and you said, man, that was an hour well spent. What would that look like? What would you learn in this time?
I know, speaking from last week's call that we did, and it's a much more casual setting where we learned a lot that I wasn't expecting to learn. You never know where those conversations are going to go, but it was great to hear about what people are doing to improve their project experience for their clients, and also for them, right? The important part is making sure that they're increasing efficiency, improving their lives as well as the agency owner, and not making everything more difficult on them. So there's an important balance here where you're improving the experience for your clients, but also improving your own work experience and all of that. And one of the interesting ones, I think, was from a NAO member, was talking about asking the clients how they can best give feedback, right? And then hearing from them and figuring out how that works in their processes. So I see Eric there. He says QA is a big headache for him, and he was not familiar with Punchlist and wants to hear more. So he's excited to learn more about that.
Awesome. Very cool. Yeah, and I want to be careful not to just like, I don't want this to turn into like a Punchlist sales thing. So I'm happy to talk about it. I've also got some other kind of thoughts and bullets prepared as well that we can talk through, just about some other things that might not be as directly related to Punchlist, but definitely happy to touch on that where it makes sense. Awesome. Anybody else have any thoughts or things that they would like to learn today? Again, you can just type that in the chat. Awesome. Okay. Yeah. So it seems like there's some interest in Punchlist here.
Lots of Punchlist interest.
Yeah, which I'm, again, happy to share. But anyway, all right, I'm going to go ahead and move on. And so we will get to talking about tools in a little bit, but I'm going to back up a little bit and talk through some kind of frameworks or high level things that I think that are important to understand in terms of creating a great project experience. So the first thing I want to talk about is the importance of knowing your audience. And so it is vital for you to have a clear understanding of who you're working with, and not just for the sales process. Like, I think we think about developing things like ICPs or ideal client profile and buyer personas and things like that for the sales process, but it also really is helpful to understand how that translates into the project experience. Things like, hey, are we working with this small business, which might just have, a small amount of stakeholders, or are we working with a business that has a large variety of stakeholders or a lot of people that need to be involved? Because that's going to help you understand what your communication cadence needs to be like, what your project cadence will end up looking like. So I'll get into some of the communication stuff in a bit, but right now, just talking about knowing your audience, that's huge. So a few years ago when I was at Polar Notion, the way I did this was I actually at one point just said, hey, we feel like we need to have a better grasp of who we are actually working with. And so I just looked back. I went back 6 months on my calendar, and I was in a sales role at the time, like sales and account management. So I literally just identified here's every single conversation I had with a prospect or a client. I made an entire list, and then I just started looking for patterns and similarities. So I looked for the size of the company. If we worked a lot with founders, and so I looked at like, hey, what's their expertise or what's their experience level? I looked at kind of the size of the project even, and the type of project that it was. And so I started to kind of like recognize these patterns, and it really helped us both on the sales side, and then also in terms of how do we actually onboard these clients? How do we, like, how much time are they even willing to give to these projects? And how do we set those expectations with them up front? So that was helpful from both a sales perspective and a project experience perspective. Also, I think another reason that's important though is because their project experience starts in the sales process. That's something that's really important to keep in mind. Is I think when we're on the side of the agency, it's easy for us to compartmentalize those things. It's easy for us to say, all right, we've got this salesperson who's kind of guiding them through this process, and then you got the onboarding handoff, and then the project experience really starts. That's not how the client views it, right? Like for them, it's this continuous thing. And so I think that's really, really important for us to recognize that and put ourselves in their shoes and recognize that how they're kind of experiencing the project with your agency. So I'd love to hear just in the chat, or if anyone's willing to come onto the screen and share a little bit more about how do you think about defining your audience? Is that something that you have pretty dialed in, or is that something that you feel like you need to give more attention to? And
I love that question, Walker. And that was something that a member of our community brought up recently, was that they actually considered their processes and their project experience as a feature, as a benefit of their services. And they have it on their website. You're going to enjoy working with us. You're not going to enjoy working with the competition, probably. They have processes and methods in place that make it smooth, easygoing, stress-free. All of those things, those are selling points. Yeah.
And especially, like I said, when you're creating something that is like custom or just any sort of creative work, it's really hard to say, hey, here's the guaranteed outcome, or here's the exact way that it's going to look. But if you can say, here's the proven process that we've done over and over and over to get there, and these 100 clients have all gone through this and had a great experience, like the value for that in the sales process is enormous. But then also in terms of actually being able to execute on that as well is massive too.
Absolutely. Awesome. And we did get it. We got another interest in Punchlist here in the chat. So
okay.
we will get to Punchlist.
Promise you,
no worries.
Everybody. You just got to sit through the first part, I'm going to hold you here until later. Awesome. Anybody got anything they want to share about how they think about defining their audience, or anybody want to come on screen and talk about that? All right. Well, we'll move on. And so again, feel free to throw some questions. There's the ask a question feature at the bottom. There's also just the chat. So honestly, I think just kind of do whatever makes sense. We're figuring this out as we go as well. All right. The next bullet point is, so it's obviously really important to know your audience, and that's from a high level. I think it's really important to know your clients. And that's when I say that, I mean that like on a really more personal level, and build trust with your clients. So if you can develop trust with your clients, it goes a long way. I think the three things that I'll just kind of highlight here is just the focus on, just being reliable, doing what you say you'll do. Transparency is massive. When things aren't going well, just being proactive and being straightforward with them about what's going well. I feel like clients should not have to read between the lines to figure things out. They shouldn't have to come to you when things are going wrong. It's generally going to be handled a lot better if you can just be transparent and proactive and helping solve problems as they come up. On the flip side, that doesn't mean that if something's going wrong, you have to go run to the client and tell them about it right away, right? I think there's definitely a line to walk there and something to balance. But in general, I think it's best to err on the side of transparency. And then the last thing would just be authentic. I think that people, ultimately they want to work with people that they like, and that's going to be a big part of building trust, is getting to know them on a personal level. And that's not, obviously you don't want to cross boundaries or lines or anything like that, but just trying to weave that into the process and create these just deeper relationships, right? And so it could be more personal things. It could be talking about hobbies. It could be things like that. Also, I think it's really valuable, and I think this gets overlooked, in knowing, especially your point of contact and the primary person that you're working with, and understanding their goals with their job and like where they're trying to go professionally. I think that's a really important part of building trust, even because the more that you can understand how to make them look good, the more that you can understand what they're trying to accomplish specifically, the more that they're going to be bought in and invested in the project as well. So you can basically win trust and win an internal champion just by being authentic and generating that that type of relationship, and just actually caring about the other person on the other end of the project. And I know that sounds kind of just like, well, duh, like we all know that, but for me, that's something like I just had to constantly be reminded of. So just wanted to share that encouragement. I think that this point. So we had know your audience, build trust. There's not much more that can be said. It's kind of like you just have to be intentional and do it, right? But definitely don't neglect this. Don't underestimate the value of doing this. All right, next thing. So the third thing I want to talk about is you've got to dial in your onboarding. I cannot overstate how important onboarding is. And I don't think, I think that everyone knows that it's important, right? Like I think that people get that. I don't think that people get just how important it is. It is definitely a balancing act. It's definitely something that, you are going to be pulled in different directions, and you're going to continuously try to make it better and improve it. And these questions and tensions you're going to face are, what's the right amount of things that I should share with the client at this point in the process? And what are the specific things that need to be communicated? But this period is critical to the success. It really is setting the course and setting the trajectory of where the project is going to go. A big part of why this is important also, and why this is such a valuable time, is there's typically a lot of excitement on both sides at this point. And so you, again, putting yourself in the shoes of the client, you've got, they've just probably had to make a tough decision between a few different people that they were talking to. And they've finally chosen to go with you. Like they've said, hey, you're our top pick. We're going to work with you. So they're really excited. They're also ready to get stuff done at this point. Typically, like they're bought in. They're like, all right, this sales process took longer than I wanted it to, probably. Let's just get the stuff going now, right? That's generally been my experience. It's not across the board always the experience. Sometimes it's tough. But yeah, generally that's a huge thing at this point in the process. Another thing that I think is important to recognize with onboarding is everyone, even before you have conversations with them, everyone brings their own expectations into this process. They before you even have a conversation on the sales process or in the strategy process, they already have expectations because they've worked with companies before, they've worked with freelancers before, they've built their own things before. So they already have some baseline of expectations for how this might go. Maybe they've even done research on the internet and kind of read some blog posts that might differ from maybe what you would suggest. They also have expectations based on the conversations that you've had with them as well. And so that's really important to recognize that you've already started setting some expectations. Hopefully you've done a great job already. So this is more of a chance to reiterate expectations and make sure that there's more alignment and kind of fill in any gaps. But if not, this is actually a chance to kind of totally course correct, right? There's this saying that we used at my agency all the time, and y'all might have heard it, but it's expectation minus communication equals frustration. And so that is something that, it's just like a super simple framework, but again, people have expectations already. Everyone kind of has an idea of how this is going to look. And if you don't explicitly change that in their minds, then you're setting yourself up for a bad experience, for frustration on both ends. So you've got to be really intentional to over communicate. And you're going to feel like you're over communicating things, and you're going to feel like you're just repeating yourself over and over and over. But definitely make sure that you go out of your way to communicate, hey, this is how it's going to go. Some things to really focus on would be like, what do you need from them right now? That could be, hey, sign this contract. Hey, I need you to send over brand guidelines or strategy documents that you already worked on, or I need specific content or access to accounts. It could also, I think so. What's needed from them right now? Also go ahead and start to set the stage for, hey, here's what the cadence will look like. Here's what I'm going to need from you at these intervals or at these checkpoints. Go ahead and, again, set that expectation around what the experience will look like and what it's going to take from them, especially from a time standpoint and a scheduling standpoint. That seems to be the area where there's often a ton of conflict and tension. Is you get 2 weeks in and you forgot to tell them, hey, we've got to schedule a check-in call. And they're like, well, I'm super busy and I don't have time to do this, right? So if you set that expectation up front, you're going to thank yourself later, and everyone will be in a much better place later. I think it's also important, again, touching on this, like setting up, what does the communication cadence look like? How will they know where you're at in the project, in the process, right? Like, how will they know how much progress you've made? How much do you talk about it internally versus how much do you talk about it with them? At Polar Notion, we had daily stand-ups, and that was, we realized that, hey, it's really important for us to tell the client that we're doing this, even though they're not involved, because they need to know that we're actively working on this every single day. And then also we checked in, we gave them a weekly update report. And so we said, hey, here's an example of what this will look like. You're going to get this every Friday afternoon. It's going to be in your inbox. And I heard last week, Chris talked about how he does that same thing essentially with Zip Message. So just having a system or a cadence in place of, here's what the communication looks like. And here's what you can expect from us. Here's what we need to expect from you. Those are all big things. And then a big thing also is, hey, if you don't do these things that I've just told you need to happen, here's the result. If you fail to get us this content on time, your project will be delayed 2 weeks. Or, setting that expectation around, hey, if both of us don't hold up our end of the deal, then there are consequences. And I want to go ahead and tell you before we get into that situation. We found that that's also a really key thing, to make sure that they understand that, hey, there are certain expectations that need to be met, certain timelines, certain schedules and deliverables that need to be met on both sides. And if that doesn't happen, then this thing is going to get off the rails. So yeah, those are just kind of some highlights. I know I just kind of like spit a lot of that out. I think last thing I'll touch on here is, I think that there's really a huge importance to put on making sure that your language is the same too. I think that we've seen, it can be really easy in the industry that we're in to just throw out a bunch of jargon, right? And just to use words like we all understand what's going on, right? But so there might be some education that needs to take place at this part of the project process to make sure that they're on track and that they're ready to go for the future. There's this analogy that I love. Has anybody ever ordered, I guess you can't really raise your hands, but I'll just ask it anyway. Has anybody ever ordered a macchiato at Starbucks? Emily, thank you for acknowledging this. Yeah. So when you order a macchiato at Starbucks, it's basically a latte, right? It's like mostly milk with some like espresso in there. If you order a macchiato at most other like specialty coffee shops, it's like mostly espresso and just like this small little cup, right? Very different things, but people use the same word for that. And so if you're used to the specialty coffee shop macchiato and you go to Starbucks and get it, you're going to be frustrated. And same thing if you are a Starbucks person and you go to the specialty coffee shop and you want a macchiato and you order a macchiato and they just give you this little like strong piece of espresso or thing of espresso, you're going to be like, what the heck is this, right? That happens all the time, especially with, more technical projects and creative projects like we do. There are just words that we assume everyone knows. Yeah, exactly. For Beth said, for instance, what maintenance really means. So yeah, making sure that you have kind of pinpointed what are those things that are often misconstrued or misunderstood, and how do you go ahead and get ahead of any issues with that, and educate your client. That could be even mean like maybe you put together a guide or some sort of workbook on working with you. There's a lot of pretty creative ways that you can approach this. And again, I shared earlier, there's not necessarily like a one size fits all here, but just understanding that onboarding is an important part of your process, especially in terms of educating your client and setting expectations. I'm going to scroll back up through the chat for a second. It looks like we got some comments and some questions going on.
Yeah, there's some really great comments in there. One thing that you touched on made me think of the concept of incremental regret, which is a big symptom of poorly set expectations, right? And it's hard to recover from too.
Yeah.
So if folks have the wrong expectations and then are let down when there's really nothing concretely to be let down by, it's just they were expecting something and you didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
That's a big pitfall there.
Yeah. One thing that happened at Polar Notion, so the way that we would do projects is we basically were very transparent, and we told people in the sales process, we have no idea how much your project will actually cost. There's all these factors. There's what do you want it to look like? What's your budget? What's your timeline? I think we would sometimes say like, hey, fast, cheap, or good, pick two. And so there's all these kind of different things that we would say. But what we'd always boil it down to is, hey, we need to actually do we called it a strategy sprint, where we just do a full strategy session for 2 weeks. So it'd include a couple of meetings, and then we'd at the end kind of provide them like, hey, here's your project roadmap. And that was a paid engagement with us. And so we weren't doing, free work before the project even started, but it was separate from the rest of the project. One thing that we learned early on is we started seeing some people churn after the strategy portion. And we always felt like the actual meetings were really, really great and that they were walking away with a ton of value. And so we eventually we called a few of them, and what turns out happened was they didn't get the deliverables for the strategy sprint in the format that they expected. We basically just sent like an email with like a rundown of things when they were expecting like more visuals and a little bit more of a polished document. And that actually ended up being the primary difference between people who ended up continuing on with us after their strategy sprint versus people who would just go and find someone else to build their project. Which, side note, that's super frustrating for us because that's like tens of thousands of dollars of business that we lost. And we already did a lot of the work for it, like a good bit of work for them. For something that was so small though, right? Like that was not hard for us to do. It literally took me 15 minutes to make a more polished template that we could then use for every project in the future. So there's like even little things like that just misaligned expectations that might not be hard to fix, but if you're not paying attention to them, can be a huge detriment to the project experience and the client experience, and ultimately your business as a whole too.
Absolutely. And Beth made some good points as well. She pointed out, we often forget that what we didn't know, what we didn't used to know, and now we do, and that our clients are in that position.
Yeah.
So being able to teach them and empower them. She brings up the concept of the Friday email, which basically runs down, what's been done and what's coming up and all those sorts of things. And she also points out that you need to have those expectations in your contract. So here's what happens if you delay your own project. So not surprising people with certain terms and that sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. It looks like there was some other questions around having an onboarding process that you follow for new clients, go with the flow for each client or not. I'm actually going to touch on this in just a second, but generally, I mean, first of all, again, everybody's business is different, but I think it's usually good to send an email or send some sort of communication with kind of an overview of the process. Introduce any key people that they need to know, and then kind of touch on some of those things that I talked about. So what's needed from them now, and then what's needed from them kind of in the future. What does the communication cadence look like? And again, this is kind of a thing that's up to you, and you might just have to test and optimize this around, again, how much do you specifically share in that intro email versus do you have an onboarding call and talk through some of these things? But again, like Beth said, repetition is the only way to drive things home. So just giving them everything they need in multiple formats. So that could be an email, that could be a document, it could be the contract itself. It could be a phone call or a video call or in-person meeting. I would try to do as much repetition as possible. At the same time, if there are things that like are urgent needs, you might not want to cloudy or muddy the waters with, hey, here's the million things that you need to know. You might want to break it up into more of a step-by-step process and say, hey, first step, I need you to look at this contract and sign it. And then they do that, and then you send them another email, right? So it really is kind of up to you, though. I'm sorry I can't give like a more definite answer. This is something that I think every agency has to know their clients, know their audience, know the types of projects that they do, and kind of figure out the cadence that works best for them. Okay. So let's see. Yeah, does anybody want to come on screen actually and just share how you do your onboarding process? Just kind of walk us through step by step the big things that you try to touch on.
If you're willing to join us up here and share, just let us know in the chat and we can invite you up. And I do want to say, Walker, we are coming up, it's 1:15, so I know that we have folks who are interested in Punchlist as well. So.
Okay. Yeah, awesome. Well, so the next thing I was going to talk about, and I kind of touched on this already, is the importance of standardizing your process. And so it looks like people have already been talking about this in the chat. Generally, I would want to err more on the side of having a standardized process. Again, though, that you can be flexible with and kind of have it be a little bit malleable for specific client needs, but generally try to keep that on track and in line as much as possible. That's going to create less surprises for you, less surprises for the client. Things won't fall through the cracks as much. Again, kind of back to what my friend earlier was talking about. He owns an agency here. He said your clients hire you because they believe you can do the job or because of the quality of your work, and they fire you because your process sucks. So if you're just trying to like kind of wheel and deal and figure it out each time and make something up every time, that's a lot of effort that it's going to take, and it's not going to create a good process, and you're going to lose clients. You're going to lose future business. You're going to lose current business. You're going to lose referral opportunities. And your team isn't going to be happy. It's just not going to be good all the way around. So you're really focusing on creating this standardized process. And I think it's actually a good practice to map out what actually is your process. Like if you don't currently feel like you have a standardized process, say, all right, what are the steps that we have to go through every single project? And then you can map out, hey, this is how it actually plays out right now. And then you can also map out, here's how we'd ideally like it to play out. Like here's a perfect project. Here's how our projects honestly play out right now. Maybe you even map out like, hey, there's a delay around the design to development handoff, but ideally that wouldn't happen. So you can start to identify where those things are disconnected. Another really important part, and this will get into some punch list related things of having a standardized process, is using the right tools. And so you can think of tools in two ways. A tool is either a pocket knife or it's a scalpel. So a pocket knife is something that you kind of just does whatever you need it to do, but it's not really going to do anything the best. So I would say typically email is a pocket knife. It's something that you can kind of use it for a lot of different things. You can update clients, you can send contracts, you can get client feedback on website projects. Like it can do a lot of different things. Everybody has access to it, but at the same time, it's not always the best way to work or to communicate. At the same time, you can think of tools as being a scalpel, and that's going to be something that is very precise, very specific intended use. They're great in the right situations. The only problem is if you have too many tools in your toolkit, it can sometimes be hard to find and know when the right one to use is. So it's definitely a balancing act. It's great to have a pocket knife and pocket knife type tools, but at the same time, you want to find some key scalpels that you can use in your toolkit. So some tools. I mean, let's see. There's obviously, in terms of like project management as well. We talked about this a lot last week. I'd love to hear what kind of tools y'all use in your project management process. If you just want to throw those in the chat.
Yeah, it's a great question, Walker. And I love hearing the different project management tools people use. ClickUp, yep. Google Docs, Basecamp, it's a big one. And what other tools, apart from just project management, but what other tools feed into that and make the project experience as a whole as well?
Yeah, I was going to ask, what is the primary tool you use to communicate with your clients? So I know at Polar and Ocean, we set up a Slack channel for every single one of our clients. And we had an internal channel for our team to discuss things, and then an external channel that's where we would actually update them on everything. So I'd love to hear, do y'all use email? Do y'all rely mostly on check-in calls? Do you use Slack? Kind of what does that look like?
Email, Beth says, yeah. And it's always interesting to hear folks plan for getting their clients to use tools, right? So if you have clients who don't traditionally use Slack and you're asking for all the communication to be done through Slack, what does that process look like? And how do you get them to buy in?
Yeah, and that was a challenge, honestly, that we faced, right? It was, we had some clients who were all for it. They just loved the fact that we did this. They were already in Slack. But then we had some clients that we had to walk them through, like, hey, this is how you set up Slack. And you can just save it as a bookmark and just use it in your browser, or you can download the app. We'd probably recommend downloading the app. But it's definitely forcing them outside of their behavior. Whereas if you're just kind of relying on whatever default they would use, so it could be email, it could be Slack, that might be a better initial experience for them, but it also might mean that it's harder to manage their project. And it might cause more things to fall through the cracks. So there are trade-offs either way. I definitely understand kind of either approach to it. So yeah, Beth, again, whatever tool they're most comfortable with, there's definitely a lot of validity to that approach. And I think, again, that goes back to knowing your audience and knowing their ability to learn new tools and change their behavior and be adaptable. I think that we worked a lot with more tech-forward founders or people, even though they came from a non-technical background, they were familiar with that world. Whereas if you're working with people who just don't get technology at all, you might want to take Beth's approach there, right? So in terms of, so I'll share a little bit about Punchlist really quick. So, and kind of how we encourage and how we've seen agencies help their clients kind of get up and running on it. A couple things is, first of all, so like Emily said earlier, Punchlist is a platform to get feedback and approval on design work or websites. So it really just kind of acts as this feedback layer that goes on top of anything that you're working on. So it supports live websites, PDFs, image files, things like that. So it's a pretty like flexible tool. It can kind of serve a lot of different use cases. But we know that if it's hard to use, then clients will default to sending an email or possibly taking a screenshot and trying to mark that up. And so that's the first thing we've tried to do is make the user experience really easy. So you literally get there, there's nothing to install. It just kind of works. There's one button for them to press, and it's kind of like a drag and drop thing that they use for feedback. I think that you can apply that to whatever tools you're using as well. Is how do you find tools that have a great user experience for both you and the client? That should be pretty high on your priority list in terms of anything that is client facing should be a great user experience. So it's easy for us to think through things in those terms in terms of user experience because we're kind of in that world. And so I think it's great to extend that into the tools that you give them access to. Another kind of quick feature, I think someone mentioned this, let's see, in the comments earlier, is just any advice for helping people get set up on Punchlist or helping clients, knowing how to use Punchlist. So when you get on Punchlist, you create a project so you can upload, your website or the project that you're working on. And then in the page details or project details, you can actually create an overview video for the project. That can be you record yourself saying, hey, I want feedback on these design elements, or hey, I need your input on copy, or you can give them really guided instructions in that process. I think especially for getting feedback, being as specific with your request as possible is the way that you're going to get high quality feedback. So if you just sent them a link or a PDF or Punchlist project or whatever format you're using, and just say, hey, just need your feedback, need your approval, you probably are not going to get as high quality feedback as if you were to say, hey, look specifically at this spot. I need your input on this. I need your input on this. How do you feel about the design? How do you feel about the layout? Whatever it is you're trying to get feedback on, be as specific as possible with your request, and try to guide them through the process. So, I mean, in terms of getting people set up on Punchlist, that's a big thing. Again, Punchlist, I think it's pretty easy to use. We've talked to a lot of agencies who they have that really non-technical client, and they've typically been able to figure it out. So, yeah, that's our hope, is that we're building for that person, that end user who generally can't figure stuff out, and they've been able to figure it out. So,
and I thought that was a really cool feature that folks in our community were excited about as well, was the video option.
Yeah,
being able to put those videos into the feedback request and guide them through it. That was something that's unique and very useful as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm very biased, but I think Punchlist is amazing. I would love for any of you to check it out. It's completely free to use, so unlimited projects, commenting, collaborators. You can have as many people using it as you want. That's all for free. There is a paid version that has integrations with some project management tools like Asana, Jira, Trello, ClickUp, things like that. So if y'all check it out, would love any feedback on it. Would love kind of any advice on, or any ideas for making it better as well. Yeah, so would love to be honored for anybody to check it out.
And something very cool is, if you were here at the very beginning before we had to restart everything, we did mention that Walker and the Punchlist team just went through demo day. And Walker, do you want to talk a little bit more about that and kind of where Punchlist is going?
Yeah. So we just wrapped up our time in the Techstars Accelerator. So if you're not familiar with that, it's a 3-month program. The way they frame it is you're going to make a year's worth of progress in 3 months. And so it kind of culminated in this big production, big event last night here in Atlanta, called Demo Day, where all 10 of the businesses that were part of the program with us got up and just kind of shared their results from the program and shared the vision of the business and kind of where we're headed and the problem that we're solving and how we're tackling it. So our founder did an incredible job. Our presentation, just it looks really sharp, and they kind of created some really cool slides and things like that with it too. So if y'all want to check that out, just learn a little bit more about Punchlist, and especially it shows a lot about where we're headed and kind of how we view the future of Punchlist. You can check that out as well. It's just a few minutes long. And that link will take you to it's the entire presentation, but it should start you right at our demo day pitch.
Very cool, Walker. And I know we've got folks here who are interested in trying Punchlist out, using it with clients, all of that sort of thing. I know there is a free forever version that you have. I'm also going to put you on the spot here and ask, can we offer some sort of special discount for our community here?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we could do is, like I said, there's the paid version that has integrations with a lot of project management tools. It also has password protected sites. So the normal sites are not they're safe as well. They're secure. They've got a generated URL that's impossible for anyone just to guess. But some people prefer to have that extra level of security as well. So that's kind of part of the paid version. We could do 30 months, or not 30 months, 30 days, first month free. So that you can see, hey, are these integrations worth paying for? If not, maybe you just kind of stick with the free version. So that's definitely something we can offer. I'll drop my email in the chat, and just email me if you're interested in taking us up on that 1 month free offer.
Awesome. Thank you, Walker. And for those of you who are here watching, there will be a follow-up email that I'll send out the link to the recording and everything. And if you're watching this recording, check that email and we'll include that in there as well so you can get in touch with Walker.
Awesome. If we have just a couple minutes, I'd love anybody put in chat just something that you're walking away from today's session with. Anything you
I'd
learned?
love to hear that too. That's a great question. Something you've learned today, something you're going to implement from today's session, something that was interesting. I'd love to hear that. Repetition is key. That is a good one. Setting the right expectations. And as you are all thinking up what to type there, I want to thank Walker for his time today. Walker, this is a great presentation, really great discussion on project management and the experience for your clients, how important that is. Beth says she learned that Walker and you are on the same page, essentially.
Very cool.
Absolutely. So processes are important, but being able to be flexible and work with your clients and creating a great experience for them. So that was really great conversation. Let's see, from Dana, we said, what kind of website do you want? Fast and cheap or good? Too many options overwhelm most people. Yeah, absolutely. Really good comment there. And Graham, lots of great feedback and sharing. His bonus was he hadn't appreciated the video feedback function in Punchlist. So he's excited to check that out.
Awesome.
That's great.
That's
and I saw Graham chatted earlier that he's working on getting a client on Punchlist today. I think he said this afternoon. So
awesome.
That's great, Graham.
If anybody needs any help with any of that, also feel free to reach out. Again, my email's up there in the chat.
Very cool. And I think one of the also very exciting things here is that we've got Walker here at the beginning of Punchlist story. And I'm excited to see where you all go. I know we've been talking for the last couple months about this demo day. Now you've had it. Big things on the horizon. So I'm excited to see where that goes.
Yeah, we're super excited. And I was telling Emily this before we jumped in the call. We shared last Friday that we're looking for beta testers for we just built a WordPress plugin. We're overwhelmed by the response. So we don't have any more room in that beta testing group. But keep an eye out. We're going to be hopefully releasing that soon if the whole beta testing process goes well. And so that should be an amazing resource for WordPress developers and agencies like y'all.
Very cool. Very cool, Walker. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everybody who joined us today, for your time and your patience. Sorry for the technical difficulties at the beginning. Hopefully it'll all be smooth sailing from here to the next webinar. So we hope to see you all at our future webinars as well. And yeah, if you want to check out this, the links and all of that, that'll be in your inbox later on this week. And again, you can reach out to Walker at usepunchlist.com and take advantage of all the cool things Punchlist has to offer.
Awesome.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. Thank you, Walker. Have a great day.
See y'all.
Bye.